Hey guys, this is chess coach Andrew Rankin from Utah Chess Institute. Today I'm going to start doing a puzzle collection. So we have 6 puzzles today. The first one is an endgame study categorized as easy. Then we'll do an endgame study categorized as medium difficulty. Then we'll do a middle game easy, a middle game medium. Then we'll do an attacking puzzle easy, and then a defending puzzle medium. So 6 puzzles total. Let's dive in. So here we have an endgame, and white just played the move king to c4. And first we want to evaluate this endgame. So first let's think about who do you think is better and why. So hopefully you identified a few things. First of all, white has a rook, black has a knight. So white is better by 2 points. But the question is the rook winning against a knight in an endgame? Well, it might be a draw if we trade off all the pawns. And secondly, we should note that black's pawns are split. Split pawns are not as strong as connected pawns. So white's pawns are connected, black's pawns are split, which means that white is not only up 2 points of material by having the rook instead of the knight, but he also has a healthier pawn structure. And lastly, the king has some easy infiltration ideas versus black's king is stuck with only one square that it can go to. So I think white is doing much better. The question is, how do we win this position? So I want you guys to think of a good move here for white after black plays king to d6. Alright guys, so here we want to kick the king back with the move e5. The king has to move back, and he has to move back to d7 so that he defends the knight. And now you notice the king is pinned to the knight, and now we bring our king up to c5. And the king is forced back. That way he can't move his pawns. So in this position he can't move his pawns because they're both stuck. He can't move the knight because it's pinned to the king. So he has to move the king back. Now that our king is in prime position to take this pawn, and his king is too far away, we take the knight, king takes, and we take the pawn. So now we've successfully won a pawn. The question is, how do we win this king and pawn endgame? Well, the king drops back to e8, and our king comes in to d6. And now the only square that black can move to is f7. And we call this a mined square. The reason why f7 is a mined square is because now our king can go to d7, and the king is forced away from the pawn. He has no more legal moves, so he's forced away. Let's say he goes back to f8. We take the pawn. The king can move here, but we can simply push the pawn and push the other pawn. We can even bring the king. Maybe give a check. We'll bring the king up, and once the king gets next to the pawn, it simply escorts it down to make a queen. So yeah, we're no problem, we can give up a pawn, but after we get to this position, we make a queen, and hopefully we know how to checkmate with queen and king. Alright, let's move on to endgame study medium. Alright, this is a much more complicated endgame. It's two rooks versus two rooks, and let's quickly count the pawns. Alright, hopefully you guys found 7 pawns for each side. Now let's look at who's got the healthier pawns. Black or white? So both sides have doubled b pawns, but white has all of these connected in one line. Black, however, has 2 f pawns, which means that black actually has the weaker pawn structure. So the doubled f pawns and the doubled b pawns are weak, versus white only has doubled b pawns. Now second, I want you guys to look at the rooks and tell me who has better rooks. So clearly white's rook on the a file is a really strong piece. White controls the only open file, and this is very important. Also, white puts a lot of pressure on this backward c pawn. So rook to c1 is always an option to add more pressure. And this rook is tied down to defending the h pawn from pushing, which would put white's rook on a second open file. And this rook is tied down to, I don't know, the defense of the c6 pawn. It's not really doing a whole lot. Ideally, this rook would really love to trade off, but he can't really do that. For example, if the king comes over and the rook comes up, we can always just give this check and then we pick off the f7 pawn. So this rook is simply guarding the 7th rank, and yeah, white's rooks are much better. The question here, though, is how does white make progress? How does white move forward? So take a minute and find a strong move. So I hope you guys found the move h4. So now it is time to break and create more open lines for white's attack. White has the king, 2 pawns, and a rook versus a rook and a pawn. So it's time for us to attack on this side of the board. We have way more attacking material than black has defenders. Oops, let's go back. Let's see, white played the move h4. Here we go. Pawn to h4. And black simply played the move f6. This is a very smart move because black does not want to take. We take, for example, if black takes, we take with the rook. Rook takes, pawn takes, and uh-oh, now we have a passed pawn as white. The king is going to come in and win these pawns. If the king ever leaves, then rook takes this pawn, and if the rook ever moves back, then we give the check and we potentially take this pawn. So this position falls apart for black, so that's why black just defends with the move f6. Now we can't take on g5 because then we hang our own rook, but instead, what do we play here? We push. Passed pawns are meant to be pushed, so we push the pawn to h5. He blocks it with the move rook to h6, and now we continue to attack. We play the move g4. No matter what black does here, our king is going to get in. So he takes, we take with the king, and now he can't stop us from getting in with a move like f5 because we would just take, or we could take here attacking the rook. So the only way that he can prevent us from getting into f5 is after king to e6. But now we play rook takes c6 check, the king moves back, and now our rook can go to c5, which attacks both pawns. He brings the king forward, which defends this pawn, and notice his rook is defending the other pawn. But our king gets into f5, and now it's really, really hard for black to do anything. You notice his pieces literally cannot move. So he decides to bring the rook up to b6. And now the question is, how do we make progress with white? Well, first we can play the move rook to c8. He brings the rook over, and now we take, king takes, and we start to push our pawns. After king to d6, we can bring the king back to this square defending the pawn, and our rook will come in. So after king to e6, we slide the rook over to c1. He brings the king back, but we can go up to c5. Notice we replaced our last rook and double attacking these 2 pawns. He decides to push with check. The king takes on g5, and this is completely winning for white. So hopefully you guys found that more challenging, but also doable. Let's move on to our third puzzle. This is going to be middle games, but very easy. So I want you guys to analyze this position. It is white's turn to play. Find a nice tactic here. So this is just a simple middle game tactic. So first we look for checks. Do you see any checks? Well, I don't see any checks. Next we look for captures. Well, we have rook takes pawn. That doesn't seem very good because rook takes, knight takes, rook takes. We lose a piece. We have rook takes this pawn. Same thing. Pawn takes rook. Knight takes, rook takes. We lose 2 pieces. But this pawn is pinned to this rook. And we can play knight takes d5. And you notice that no matter what he takes back with, he's going to lose this knight on c4. Because if he takes with the pawn, which defends the knight, he loses the rook. If he takes with the rook, then we can take the knight with either of our rooks. I like probably rook c takes, and we just win a pawn. And if he takes with the king, well, that's not legal because our rook is guarding. So this is just a simple middle game strategy of putting pressure on the pinned pawn and then taking the pawn that is no longer able to take back. because this knight is hanging. So this pawn is overworked, and this pawn is pinned. So taking advantage of the c-file pressure, which is very common in Queen's Gambit Declined and Caro-Kann games. So let's move on to a middle game. All right, guys. This is going to be a combination of our middle game medium and a defending puzzle, so our last puzzle is also a defending puzzle. So in this position, we're white, and if you guys count the material, you should find that white is winning by 2 pawns. White has an extra 2 pawns here on the queen side. Also, white has 2 bishops versus black's 2 knights. So I definitely prefer the bishops, especially when there are pawns on both sides of the board. So there are pawns on the queen side and there are pawns on the king side. So these are on the king side and these are on the queen side. When there are pawns on both sides of the board, the knights oftentimes get overworked. They're not able to go to both sides of the board to fight. So the bishops are much stronger here than the knights. But our opponent plays knight takes e3. And how do we defend against this threat? So black's idea is pretty simple. After pawn takes, queen takes check, if we block with the bishop, or for example, if we block with the bishop, or if we move the king, queen takes rook, and we're losing quite a bit of material here. So we can't take the knight right away, so I want you guys to find a much better move. So this is how we defend against broken tactics properly. Alright guys, hopefully you found the idea that the rook needs to move so that when we take and he takes back with check, we don't have a hanging rook and a hanging bishop. So we play rook to c7, attacking the queen first. Then when the queen moves, we can play pawn takes knight. Queen takes pawn check, which forks our king and our bishop. But alas, we can play bishop to f2. And we attack the queen, and you notice he doesn't have the move rook to d1 check because our bishop guards that square. Notice if he did have rook to d1 all the way back here, after rook to c7, if he played rook to d1 check and our king moved away, we would actually get checkmated very quickly. After knight here, king here, maybe knight check, king here, knight here, king here, queen here, and then this is mate. But luckily our bishop always defends this square, and that's why the move after knight takes rook c7, queen moves, pawn takes, queen takes, bishop moves to f2. This is a broken tactic for black, and black just lost a piece here. Alright guys, moving on, 2 more puzzles to go. Let's look at attacking. So in this position, it's black to play. Let's find a really nice move here that is a nice attacking move. Alright, hopefully you guys found the move bishop to e4. So the threat is simply queen to h1, checkmate. Our opponent plays pawn to f3. And now the question, as you saw the arrow, the question is, can we play the move rook to c2 check? So the key is, can we play rook to c2 check? Because you always have to be careful of back rank checkmate. So if rook to c2 check is not working, you might end up getting back rank checkmated because your back rank is hanging and moves like this, and your bishop is hanging. Alright guys, calculate, calculate. Calculate after rook to c2 check. So the king has to go to h3. Hopefully you found the move bishop to f5 check. The pawn has to come forward to g4. And now what's the quickest checkmate? Hopefully you found the move queen h1 check. King moves over, and now queen h2 checkmate. So the answer to our question was yes, we can play rook to c2 check because it is checkmate. Alright guys, last puzzle. This is also a defensive puzzle. Alright, let's look at this puzzle from the white side. So black played the move queen to b6, and black has a double attack on the center pawn and also a single attack on the b2 pawn. How do we defend both pawns at the same time? This one's very tricky, but if you can find moves like this in your games, this is how you stay alive. So the answer, or I should say a hint, is you need to defend one of these pawns with a piece, and you need to defend the other pawn using tactics. So which pawn is more important to defend, the B pawn or the D pawn? Of course, the D pawn is more important to defend. So we're going to play bishop to E3. Bishop goes to E3. That way the D pawn is nice and defended. And white sets a nice trap for black. If black plays the move queen takes B2, uh-oh, I think that queen is in big trouble. See if you can find the move here that tactically defended the B2 pawn, because now the queen is trapped. How do we trap the queen here? Alright, if you guys found the move knight to A4, bravo. The bishop cuts off the B5 square. The knight attacks the queen and also cuts off the B6 square. Also, the knight takes away the C3 square. The rook defends the pawn, also defends A2. The queen defends on C2. The pawn defends on B3. The A3 pawn defends on B4. And of course, the rook defends all of the back rank. And guess what? The queen is officially trapped. She has nowhere that she can go. So the best move here is queen takes rook. Queen takes queen, and uh-oh, all of a sudden black went from actually a much better position to losing here. Alright guys, hopefully you found that useful. If you didn't solve all of them, no problem. Feel free to watch the video again. Take care. Bye.